Harry, why don't you tell me about the Leedy and Stroop company? There's Leedy, then there's Stroop. How did that come
Yep.
about?
Eugene Leedy sold the Leedy Manufacturing Company again because he was ill. His kids were all in college, and he didn't really feel that the one son that was interested in the business was old enough and could handle the company. So he decided to sell to Con Band Instruments, a company that he'd made drums for. So the arrangement, they think, is that Con said, look, we'll leave everything just the way it is. We love you just the way you are. We're not going to change anything. Leedy went away on his first trip in years, bought a new Cadillac, went on a trip with another couple, was in an accident, tore up the Cadillac, bought a new one, came home in it. When he came home, he'd really found out that Con was moving the factory, and there were a lot of people who weren't going to go. So he decided he would put up some money for a second company. But he didn't want him to just make drums because he really felt that would limit money. So they made a company called General Products, and they bought a little factory, and they were going to make a number of things, including drums, but not just drums. And so he then dies. Before it was finished, they didn't have the wood shop yet. Mrs. Leedy stepped up, took money, and gave them money to do the wood shop inside that factory. And the company was referred to as L&S. And so it's come down through history that L&S stood for Leedy and Stroop, since that younger Leedy boy, whose name was Edwin, and he went as Hollis at that time.
Okay, that's the name I remember. Okay.
Edwin Hollis Leedy. As he got older, he went back to Ed. But so Hollis Leedy went in with Cecil Stroop. Cecil Stroop had been the engineer at Leedy. Cecil Stroop was a pretty dour guy. You don't see him smiling. He didn't look very happy. And he and Hollis Leedy didn't get along at all. Hollis Leedy told him never come in the factory. He would run the factory, and Stroop needed to stay in the office. So it just wasn't going to be good. So L&S, according to the Leedy family, was going to be Leedy and Sons. And Con said, you can't use Leedy and Sons. You can't use We Bought Your Name. And so they just left it at L&S. And so then Stroop said, no, it stands for Leedy and Stroop. We don't know which story is correct. Pick the one you like. Maybe both are correct. But General Products didn't have enough money to have a sales force. So they contracted with a large place in Chicago called the Chicago Musical Instrument Company, and that was the sales force for L&S Products. And so L&S made drums from, really realistically, probably about 1933 to 1939, and they never were anything more than kind of a second-run company. If you look at their hoops have little imperfections in them. Their dies had little imperfections. They were Leedy-esque in the look, but never practically so. Kind of the world passed them by. But they made mallet instruments and sold a lot of stuff in Indianapolis. And Ed Leedy was a very interesting guy. But to his dying day, he hated Cecil Stroop.
Yeah. What a story.
Stroop left L&S and went straight up to Chicago and went to work for the Ludwigs. He was their engineer. If you see some of the early WFL strainers, you can see, that to me was Leedy's weakness. That was WFL's weakness.
Uh-huh.
The original Ludwig strainers by Danley, the brother-in-law of William F. Sr., great stuff. You could drive a car over it and it'll work. But the strainers that Stroop designed for Leedy and Stroop designed for WFL were very weak. As soon as they got rid of Stroop, they had other people design the strainers for Leedy, and then all of a sudden they became great again. So then during World War II, Stroop moved to Cleveland, Ohio, went to work for the White Band Instrument Company, and then that went into government work for the war, and he never left Cleveland. Never got back into drums again. He stayed with White Band Instruments. And I think he died in Cleveland. So he sort of falls off the map after
my hometown, Cleveland, Ohio.
But he's the guy, he invented the tuning system that ended up being the knob tension design. He did it for Leedy and Stroop, called the Master Tension System. It's all this aluminum inside a drum. He did it for WFL with their Victorious line. And then George Way, who didn't like Stroop either, sort of copied it, I think, for
with the knob tension,
the knob tension design.
That's fascinating because it's funny, you know, with I thought that type of tuning was really an ingenious idea, especially for the reasons during the war years, because of the 10% law and all that stuff. But for them to come up with that type of tuning system, the idea that just, you know, you don't even tune from the top, you tune from the sides, was to me ingenious. And it's funny that when you see the knob tension, and then you look at, you know, the knob tension was what, 1951, I believe, or
yeah.
And then you have WFL doing it in the 40s. There's a span there, yet same idea, very similar technology, just copying an older idea. And that was all on account of Cecil Stroop, you say?
Well, yeah, and I think what happened with the knob tension drums was that coming out of World War II, you know, the first catalogs were really copies of the last catalogs, the 1941s. The product was pretty much the same, and I think what happened with Leedy is, you know, coming into, you know, the brand new era in 1950, and I think they wanted to stick out. So Way came up with this knob tension thing and said it's as easy as tuning a radio. You know, one knob one way takes it up, and the knob the other way, just like your radio, takes it down. And who looks inside a drum? I mean, you know, most drummers don't look inside drums except when they tune heads. And it sort of had a modernistic look. It didn't have lugs on it, and unfortunately, it just wasn't in research and development long enough. Bill Ludwig, just to tell you another story about that, is you know, the question of, do drum companies have research and development departments? No, not really. Ludwig told me that he made $1 million on Vistalites. You know, they weren't the first ones, but they brought out the acrylic shells and the different colors and the patterns, and you could see guys through them, and there'd be the jokes about they were like aquariums, you know.
Sure, I remember when they came out, yeah.
And I said, well, what went wrong? I mean, you know, you made it. He said, we lost $1 million on Tivoli. Tivoli system was the Vistalites with lights inside
Ultimate
them,
disco set.
and controlling and a controller.
Wasn't it the controllers that was the problem?
Well, he said that, you know, again, they didn't have a research and development.
Okay, yeah.
Came in and talked about the lights. Said, you know, these lights will last for 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but what they didn't think about was all the vibration that would happen as guys were hitting drums and the shells would vibrate and stuff. And he said, you know, that's what happened. They started going out left and right. It's not like, you know, lights on a building, lights on a walkway. The other uses of those lights, these were inside a percussive instrument, and they just couldn't take it.
Too much vibration.
So the $1 million we made on Vistalites was the same $1 million we lost on Tivoli.
So it all evened out in the end.
Yeah, and that was big money. You know, that was $1 million when, you know, that was probably the equivalent of $10 or $12 million today.
That would break a company. Man. So let's talk to the new collectors today. Harry Cangany's advice for a young kid that's maybe watching what I do here, and maybe he's just getting that itch, that he's getting interested in the history of the drums and starting to really get the fever. How would you instruct someone like that? Some of the mistakes that I made, and I think you did too, the old, you know, I want that drum in every color that they ever made, or I'd like every model, give them some advice on how not to make some mistakes.
Well, I think there's an awful lot of source material out. There are books and articles and opinions from lots of people all over the world on what's good to find.
And one of those books is yours that I didn't tell them about before, The Great American Drums and the Companies That Made Them, 1920 to 1969. I'm holding it up right here. Not to cut in on you there, Harry, but this book, you know, this was your first book. I've read this thing so many times, it's worn out here, but what a great book. He's talking about source materials. This is one of them. Rob Cook's books, he's got a million of them, but those are ways to get educated. But go ahead, Harry.
Well, my first book's out of print, and I've noticed that it is on sale from time to time on eBay for like $200 a copy.
Amazing.
So I wish I'd have a storeroom of a couple hundred of those. And
Jeez, I got a copy right here. Okay.
It was fun to make it, and I had a great editor at Modern Drummer who was involved. The only thing I got mad at him about was they didn't send me the proofs before they printed, and there were some mistakes in there that I would have caught. But it's okay. I love Rick Van Horn, and I wish him well. Anyway, I would always tell people to look for what interests you first, so that you kind of get an idea of to expand from that. Where I got on the ride is I was a kid from the '60s who came back in the late '80s, and the world had changed. Today's drummers got a bunch of brands available that didn't exist when I was, when I started out. So
right.
I was really looking at, 5 or 6 different brands. I wasn't looking at Pearl or Tama or Yamaha or, some of the other companies that are out now. So I think you need to decide the era that you're interested in. For me, that really stops about 1969. Not that there weren't some things in the 70s, and I guess later to get your hands on if that's what you want. But for me, it was the time frame of my first book. It was, somewhere in the 20s, depending on the company you're looking at. Some companies got into what I would consider modern drums before other ones did. But sometime by 1930 to 1969 is the time frame that I liked. For me, 60s drums are still practical to be played out. You get some of the fragile ones from the 30s and the 40s, and you might not want to do that because you can't get the parts for it. But by the 60s, they were making an awful lot of stuff. So there are Superphonics, and there are, Rogers Power Tones and Gene Krupa models from Slingerland that are, there are a lot of those out there.
Let me ask you this. For just sonic properties, let's say a studio wanted to include some vintage drums to offer to the drummers that are coming through there. Could you suggest like a dream recording vintage set? What do you think? Or is it just strictly a matter of opinion, or are we talking like 3-ply Ludwig shells resonate better, or is it that great Gretsch sound? I've been asked this question from young collectors. They'll write to me and say, "Look, we got a recording studio, and we want to get that vintage sound in here, but what do you think?" I'm not really sure what to tell them.
Well, the first thing I would tell you is one of the lessons that I learned really hard. I got a Slingerland Radio King and I bought a newer Slingerland set, and I had like 3 or 4 drums, and I had them all tensioned about the same, with the same heads, and I stood in the distance, and with my back to them, I had a friend of mine, play them, and I'll be damned, I couldn't tell one from the other.
Really?
I was laughing about the fact that, I always say that get the Radio King because of this and because of that, and hell, I can't tell the damn difference.
Isn't that amazing?
A lot of it has to do though with the heads and the tensioning.
I agree.
I think Buddy Rich never said use tuning as a word, use tensioning. I remember when I was young, man, I could care less about that. I mean, I just put my drums together and I just play them. And they could have sounded like cardboard boxes, and I probably wouldn't have been able to tell. As I got older, I really get to the point where I felt that every drum had a sweet spot, and I couldn't tell you how to find it. I could only tell you I knew when I found it.
Telling you, right now I am playing a 70s piccolo metal Ludwig snare, blue and olive badge, and there is a sweet spot just to the right of the strainer, right over that tension rod. I can't believe it. No matter what head I put on, I don't get it, but it has to be on that sweet spot. It's a definite, remarkable difference.
Well, and if you took a drum key and you detensioned it a little bit, you'd go, well, no, that's not right. And then you'd put it back, you go, that's right.
Yeah.
You tighten it a little more, you go, no, that's not right. It's that, again, I can't tell you when you'll find it. I can only tell you I can hear it when I finally hear it. So I'm the guy now who's my own worst nightmare. I now mess around with the tensioning for what seems like an eternity until I'm absolutely sure that each drum hits its sweet spot. And I just wish I would have known that before. Now, so I think a lot of it is quality heads. I've heard some pretty cheap Asian drums from the 60s, 70s sound pretty damn good when they had the right heads on them and good snares. And when I say good snares, gosh, all the ones I had when I was a kid were Ludwig snares. I really came to appreciate Slingerland snares.
Really?
They made great snare wires.
Why is that?
Pure Sound makes great. I mean, they're not the only ones.
Yeah, I've heard Pure Sound all over the place. But why do you think those Slingerlands were the ones?
The heads and the snare wires make an awful lot of difference. And now, that being said, I like, depending on where I'm playing, I like brass. I play Black Beauties mostly when I play out. But I always have, whatever I'm playing, I always have the opposite shell material. So, for example, if I'm playing out in a 6.5 Black Beauty, I have either a 4 or a 5 wood shell snare drum to my left. So I don't cross stick. I've always enjoyed having two different snare sounds. Plus, if anything happens to the main drum, you got another one sitting right there. You can take over. And some things like heads break, and that happens. And I don't want to take time to change a head. So I would say to somebody that first you find what you like to play. Start with that. I always have believed that 4x14s are great drums to have because they never have made very many of those. They almost always appreciate in value. Again, because they make an awful lot of 5s, and then the second size is 6.5, and then the third size is about a 4. So think about that. And then, obviously, if you want to get into piccolos, fine. But right. I probably buy every 4x14 I can find.
Huh.
I also think every 14x14 floor tom in vintage times is worth buying because they didn't make very many.
They're just rare.
Gretsch did, but most everybody else didn't. They were making 16s, and you can find 16s all over the place.
Yeah.
Rogers 4x4, Rogers 14x14s are $1,000 drums now.
I mean, when I think I saw on eBay, I was shocked because I have the 2 sets of Rogers Mardi Gras, with the different Mardi Gras patterns, but no floor toms with them. And, one came up on eBay, and I was tempted, but I knew it was going to be about $1,000. I just knew I wouldn't be able to do it at that time.
Yep.
But I prefer 14s. But I noticed also on the back of your book, Great American Drums, you're playing a beautiful set of Slingerland White Marine Pearls. Why don't you tell me about that set?
Well, all right. I got a telephone call from Charlie Donnelly.
Uh-huh.
And he said, Harry, how would you like to buy one of Buddy Rich's sets? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, a student in Florida of Les DeMerle's has one of Buddy's kits. And I said, Buddy Rich has probably had 400 drum sets in his career. He goes, no, really. And I said, and how can you tell if it's really his? Because, open up the 1976 Slingerland catalog or, one before that, and there's Buddy Rich with a 24-13 216s, a snare drum. His signature set, they sold a blue million of them because of him. In fact, the reason Ludwig got him back was they were losing sales to Slingerland because of Buddy Rich. Slingerland was paying Buddy Rich, $5,000 a year, and Ludwig said, we'll pay you 10. Jeez. And he said, oh, okay, and he switched over. And by the time Stelmer bought Ludwig, I think he was up to $25,000 a year, and they said, we don't play people to play our clarinets. We're not paying a drummer. And the next thing you know, Buddy Rich is playing a whole set of radio kicks.
Suddenly,
but,
yeah.
The story in between is everybody that tried to get him, and he didn't do it. Drum Workshop sent him a drum set, and he played it for a little while, and he sent it back, and he said, I don't like them. They look like little clocks.